Hello and welcome to the Glimmerman. Today we have a video about a being that is equal parts fascinating as it is mysterious. Originally, when I was given a topic suggestion by a longtime fan of the channel named James Kasusnik, I was interested in the idea of it, but found it a bit odd. Filled with the idea of a creature that resembled something that either the minds of David Bowie or Elton John would create, I went to try to find information about it. Being it is a relatively new sighting, I strictly had to rely on the internet since they couldn't be found directly in any lore or history books. What I found was a being that was interesting and nothing like what I had previously mentioned I'd imagined. I was going to make this a cryptid spotlight, but, well, you will see quickly why I'm having such an issue classifying this being. However, there are a few paranormal creatures that do exhibit a similar behavior, so we will be looking at that as well. So, my cryptid family, let's look at the Glimmerman and try to figure out what it is. Many of us are aware of the science fiction movies about the alien creature known as the Predator. I love this creature, but come to find out there may be a real-life counterpart called the Glimmerman, which has been seen mostly in the United States, but also can be found in locations around the world. I know many of you may be rolling your eyes at this point, but keep in mind, even though sightings are relatively recent, there are a few from the early 1970s, and the first Predator movie started filming in 1986. Now, the Predator of the movies had all types of cool technology, including the iconic laser-sighted shoulder cannon. The Glimmerman lacks all these tools, except for the cloaking camo and the apparent ability to traverse dense forests with ease, as well as handling quite a fall without injury. It does also share the apparent interest in humans as well. In case you were curious, there aren't any reports of this being taking human skulls or spines as trophies. Not a lot is known about this being, especially since it has never been seen outside of its translucent form. Or should I say, no one has reported seeing it as of making this. However, I could understand people being shy about talking about encountering this creature, since many skeptics would inevitably be pretty harsh towards them. Due to this, many of the reports give pseudonames, which normally I have an issue with, but I will give it a pass here since I understand why. So let's go semi-chronologically into the reported sightings. In the Kostashie National Forest in Louisiana, we have our first encounter. In 1976, an avid hunter and fisherman, who we will call Bill, was out with a friend looking for ducks. As they sat on the bank of the river, the dogs that they had with them suddenly started acting anxious and unruly for no apparent reason. Looking across the landscape, Bill noticed something odd moving around just outside of the tree line. He described it as looking like rolls of saran wrap stacked up on top of each other, but in the shape of a man. The being was visible, but at the same time it seemed transparent. The outer edges showed form, but as you looked near the center, it was more invisible. As he watched, this object seemed to move along with a purpose in mind, that is, until somehow it realized it was being watched and froze in place. Bill and his friend decided it was a good time to go home and started to make their way to the truck. They packed up all their stuff and put the dogs in their carriers, and everything seemed normal. It was at this moment Bill took one final look around to see if they were being followed, and there he saw the being, still invisible, crouched down on a branch in a nearby tree, just sitting there watching them. Not wanting to know what the creature was planning to do, the men got into their truck and left the area. They never spoke a word of this encounter to anyone for fear of being thought crazy. Jumping ahead to the year 2017, Bill's son, who we will call Dan, was out with his cousin in the same forest, scouting out places for the upcoming hunting season. Halfway through their trek, the cousin asked Dan about what it was that seemed to be following them around. Dan thought it was a joke, as he was unaware of this activity, but the cousin insisted he was being serious. The two kept on with their scouting and finally set up camp for the night. Even though Dan was still thinking it was all a joke, he did admit that every strange sound in the forest had him on edge. In the morning, the two men were gathering up their campground when suddenly Dan noticed the cousin just staring off at something. When asked, he said, "I think I'm looking at the Predator." So Dan looked in the same direction and to his horror saw a man-shaped invisible being sitting on a tree branch just appearing to be watching them. They looked at it for a while, but it never moved. This made Dan think it was possibly an optical illusion and nothing more. It was at this point that Dan said it was like the being read his thoughts, and it stood up and leapt from its perch to the ground with an audible thud. It then started to walk towards them, moving with an incredible speed before it ducked into the forest. The men gathered their things very quickly and made for their vehicle. Dan said that the whole time that they were walking, they were being followed, and every time he turned around to take a break, there was the being, but it never got closer than 50 feet. The creature seemed to have no trouble traversing the thick underbrush as it tailed the two men. Both men were exhausted from not being able to take a moment's rest for fear of this being, even though it was evident it could have caught them if it wanted to, and they finally made it to their vehicle after 2 hours of walking. They managed to leave without incident, but Dan said he was in no hurry to return to the area. It wasn't until a family gathering that he found out about his dad's encounter in 1975, when he simply stated, "So you saw the Phantom as well." Now we move on to 3 shorter sightings, but still equally fascinating. In Columbus, Ohio, in August of 2001, a man named Justin was staying at his mother's house. While watching TV at around 10 o'clock at night, he suddenly noticed how their dogs were nowhere to be seen, which was an oddity since they normally cuddled up with him. This made Justin a little concerned, but he didn't think much about it. As the night progressed, he couldn't shake the feeling that he wasn't alone in the house, which he should have been since his mother was at work. As he looked around the room, he noticed something odd standing near the entryway to the dining room. Justin said he could only describe it as the predator in cloaked form. It was human-shaped and stood around 5'7". While watching it for a while, it didn't move, but then very suddenly lurched forward and ran across the room. Not sure what to do, Justin covered his eyes and waited for the inevitable. He said he even felt a burst of air sweep over his body, as it would if someone suddenly run by him. After quite a few minutes without any incident, he finally uncovered his eyes and found he was alone again. Justin went to the game room in the house and grabbed a baseball bat and began searching. The being was apparently gone, but he did find the dogs cowering under a computer desk upstairs. On October of 2018, in Red River Gorge, Kentucky, a man named J.W. and his wife were staying at a hotel after a full day of hiking while on their vacation. At 3 in the morning, J.W.'s wife started complaining about a stomach issue, so being the good husband, he got in the car in search of a store for something to help her. Little did he know that the town they were staying in didn't have any stores that stayed open all night. So after doing a search on his phone, he found a 24-hour gas station that was about 30 minutes away. When he was close to the store, he slowed down for fear of having a deer jump out in front of him, and that is exactly what happened. As JW watched the deer run out onto the road, he noticed it was being chased by an invisible being that was in the shape of a man. He said you could see the form of it, but in the center of the body, it was completely see-through. Both the deer and this being ignored JW's car, and they continued to run across the road into an adjacent forest. JW states that he was wide awake, albeit a little shook from the deer, but he had no clue what the invisible thing was. He did state that the whole trip back to the hotel, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was being followed. This feeling continued for quite a few days afterwards as well, to where it seemed like he was being watched. Our final sighting didn't come with a date, but it occurred in Honduras. Bob was staying at his friend's house in what he says is a mountainside neighborhood. One morning, after eating breakfast, he was sitting on his bed waiting for his friends to get ready for the day. Suddenly he saw a translucent figure of a man run through the living room and out into the balcony. When he got up to check, nothing was there. Bob described it as looking like a human-shaped mirage, but the outline was visible. He tried to figure out a natural explanation as to what he saw, but came up empty-handed. What is interesting is that a few members of the house claim to have been abducted by aliens before, and they say they frequently see paranormal events. In one encounter, others in the house saw the Glimmerman as well, but they claim to have just learned to live with it. I do want to mention that outside these stories, there are 2 others dating from 1970 till the year 2000 from Alaska, but I'm not sure what the people saw fits this story, as it seems to be more like a skinwalker, or at worst, a traditional Wendigo. I am including links to these stories in the description. So after all these stories, we are left with the question of, what exactly could this be? Well, the first thing that makes it difficult to figure out is due to the fact that it really hasn't been seen outside of its invisible state. Granted, it could be possible that the invisible state is its natural form, but that seems a little unlikely. Yet again, who knows? What is known is that there are a few candidates that could be related to this, or at best give us a clear picture as to what it really is. The first thought that came to my mind was this possibly is a form of a shadow person. While the behavior of being aloof and seeming to phase from our reality fit, I don't see them as our culprit. Namely, because outside of the entity known as the Hat Man, or Haunted Road Media's Mike Ricksecker's account of the Crawler, most shadow people tend to avoid human interaction, while just barely staying out of our periphery. A creature that I made a video about seems to be fairly similar. That would be the Manus Man. It is basically a man-sized praying mantis that in most stories can use a form of cloaking camouflage, much like this creature. It has been seen primarily in wooded areas and streams. The only issue I have is that while it does try to avoid being seen in most accounts, it doesn't take to following people around. Not only this, but it doesn't appear to use its camouflage for prolonged periods of time. The Glimmerman has never been seen without it, while the Manus Man has. Could this mean the Manus Man has developed better cloaking technology? Or could it also imply this Glimmerman is of the same origins or plane of existence as the Manus Man, possibly indicating an extraterrestrial link? As an interesting tidbit, I did find a report of another being that may just be the clue we needed. Malaysia has stories of a group of supernatural beings known as the Orang Bunyan, which translates to hidden people. These people look just like you and I for the most part and are said to be invisible. They can only be seen if a person has the ability to have spiritual sight. The Orang Bunyan live in the forests and mountains, and while most are seen as benevolent, many of them have been blamed for people becoming lost in the forest. What makes this really interesting is that at first I thought the previous sightings of the Glimmerman being in people's houses seemed odd. I found that due to being invisible, the Orang Bunyan are known to share the houses of humans. To me, this being seems like the most plausible example of all the Glimmerman behaviors. As I end this video for the week, I am curious about your thoughts on this strange being. Is it one of the rare new cryptids that seem to be popping up, or is it simply someone's overactive imagination from watching too many Predator movies? Also, I am curious, what would you classify this thing as? A cryptid, an alien, a spirit, or something entirely different? I also forgot to mention in last week's video that the story of the silver humanoid was referenced from a site I recently found called the National Cryptid Society. They seem to be a great place to find interesting stories about cryptids and have a place where you can even report your own sighting. I highly recommend taking a moment and checking them out, and I'll provide a link to their site in the description. As usual, here are 3 comments from last week's video that I greatly enjoyed. Also, as a bit of a bending of the rules, I'm presenting one from a video made a while ago since, well, because I wanted to. Our first comment comes from Tanya Rollerson, who says, "I love your calm and mellow voice. It even makes horror stories sound invigorating." Thank you so much, Tanya. Over the years, my narration has been one people either hate or they love. I still see comments on the latter side of that from time to time, but ones like yours seem more common. Maybe everyone is just getting used to my presentation style by now. While I am nowhere near this, not even in the same planet really, I do idolize horror genre legends such as Vincent Price. Next up, we have a comment from Charizard Can Do Things, who says, "Does this mean we're going to get a Mothman vs. Jersey Devil discussion?" Thank you for your comment, Charizard. I know you have been a longtime fan of my content. A while back, I considered doing a series of videos on pitting 2 cryptids against each other like a versus battle. I forget why I never made it, but it could be possibly due to there being other channels that somewhat do the exact same thing. Much like those videos, I do not have the skills or tools to present it in a way that is interesting visually, like the famous Screw Attack's Death Battle series. I think it's obvious animation isn't a skill I possess. I do like the idea though, especially since Jersey vs. Mothman holds a special place in my heart. In fact, just this year I was going to get a tattoo depicting that battle, but couldn't get the vision to look correct in ink. Who knows? I may make this series anyway, since I just recently started a state-by-state cryptid video, even though I said I wouldn't. So, long story short, maybe? Fred Davis says, I would love for you to do Missouri, my home state. It sounds like the creature is the same one, and as a point of order, some creatures do change behaviors and get more bold or aggressive with age. Keep up the great work, as me and my friends always make a night of your videos and cryptid movies whenever you post. Thank you so much, Fred. The response for the next state to be covered in my state-by-state cryptid series has been really great. I haven't done a final tally of votes yet, but Pennsylvania and Florida seem to be neck and neck at the moment. This obviously could all change by the time I go to make the next video. Just so it is said, I will be covering all states by the end of the series. I agree that the white-colored Bigfoot found in Illinois seems to be the same creature as the others, and minor changes in behavior could be due to age. Your comment about making a night of my content with your friends took me back a little bit. I am greatly honored by this, but I still have issues with wrapping my head around the idea that my videos are so popular with everyone here. The whole YouTube thing still amazes me, but I am very thankful for all of you. The final comment comes from Goblin B, who commented on a video I made a long time ago called 10 More Lesser Known Cryptids. I normally keep this section to my most recent videos, but I couldn't pass up the opportunity to talk about this comment's topic. He said, someone needs to make a horror movie featuring the Knucklevi. Thank you for that comment, Goblin B. Yes, you are certainly right. The Knucklevi is a creature that is one of nightmare fuel. It certainly is a creature that could give most modern-day horror monsters a run for their money. I did a quick search and see that oddly enough, no one has made anything about this being, outside of a reference in a song in the video game A Bard's Tale. This project certainly needs to happen. If you haven't yet done so, do please consider subscribing to my channel for similar content to this, and also could you share my videos with someone you know who may enjoy this type of genre. With that, be safe, and I'll see you in the next one.